Welcome to the GreatBase Tennis Podcast, 77. Brandon Flanagan is in his own house, the FM Tennis Center, Boynton Beach, Florida. FM Tennis Performance Center. Did I say that right?
I don't live here yet, but feels like I live here.
That's true. That's true. I'm Steve Smith. I've been called a lot worse. 77. There used to be a TV show called Sunset Strip. Flanagan, you're too young to have heard of that.
It's a few years before my time.
Podcast, we mentioned in the last podcast, we're going to talk to a dear friend of Vic Braden's. It's been postponed by a week, so we'll do that next time. Specialty shots and emergency shots, that's our topic. If you go back to our first podcast, we covered the forehand, the backhand, the serve, the return to serve, and such, but we haven't talked about specialty shots and emergency shots. But before we do that, from last week, Dr. Dom Lausick, he wanted to just say a few things. He really felt bad that he didn't talk about GreatBase Tennis and give us a plug. So thanks for that. The plug is that deliberate practice. His mentor, Dr. Anders Ericsson, the late Dr. Ericsson, Florida State, Swedish gentleman, did so much research in building myelin. We talked about how Daniel Coyle in the Talent Code or Malcolm Gladwell in Outliers really drove that point home, the 10,000 hours. But with extended periods of practice, deliberate practice, deep, intent, purposeful practice, 1 year, 3 hours a day is 1,000 hours. And what it really comes right down to what happens to people where they will revert back. Instruction, destruction. Any comments on people reverting back, making changes? You work with them, and then they go out and they play. And
Oh yeah, I've seen it all the time. I mean, you work with a player for so long just to say keep the grip on number 3 on the forehand, and they play one weekend tournament, and now all of a sudden magically it's on number 4. So that stuff happens. I think pressure will do that to players, and certainly not going back to the well and working on basics after a lot of live ball and tournament play happens all the time.
Dom's so thorough. He sent us a few notes how mental skills are so important for deliberate practice, having the motivation, the goals, the grit, the perseverance to do the type of practices that are not that much fun. The athlete being a biocomputer, you're basically programming the brain. So people have to deprogram and reprogram, have to take steps back, 10 steps back, 100 steps forwards. There's so many comments. So instruction, destruction would be one. People ask me, how long is it going to take to change my strokes? And when they ask me that, I say a little less than the ice age, because they're not thinking about changing their strokes. They're thinking about how long it will take to change their strokes. Another one that comes to my mind is the pain of change is greater than the pain of losing. Ego kills, and people, they really don't want to go backwards. A couple other things, we could put this out on our Facebook, GreatBase Tennis Facebook, is Dom sent in a questionnaire that he calls True Grit. Angela Duckworth, number one characteristic for grit is empathy. But there's different versions. There's just questions for parents, for players, for coaches. He also had mentioned that he would like to have said in his interview with us as having team questions. Keep it confidential. It's really perhaps just the head coach who sees what is written. I don't know if this would work with really young players in a junior program, but it should if you're really creating a culture, a championship culture, where the teammates, confidentiality, they write about each other, positives and negatives. I think that kids who aspire to play Division I tennis, that's going to happen. I've heard it been said that the sophomore, it's like they have so much experience and they really don't, but they're given responsibilities in educating the incoming freshmen. Football last weekend, I think of Tom Brady. There was an article in Sports Illustrated. We just talked about being a rookie and being a rookie again, where you go from freshman football to JV football to varsity football, college where you're a walk-on or a red shirt, his case a red shirt, then all the way to the pros.
I think one quick parallel between the Australian Open, something that just happened yesterday, and something that happened during the football playoffs this past weekend. The game between the Bills and the Chiefs. I don't know if you watched that one.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Amazing game. It's probably the most exciting game I've ever watched. But there were a lot of questions afterwards about the overtime rules in the NFL. And Josh Allen, the losing quarterback for the Bills, if those of you who don't follow football or if you didn't watch the game, Josh Allen was then asked, well, do you think they should change the rules for overtime? And he more or less said the rules are the rules. If we were on the winning end, we'd be celebrating just the same as they are. So I'm not going to complain about the rules. And then I see Shapovalov, Nadal, and it's a very different dialogue. You saw the noise about the umpires?
No, one of our Canadian visitors, a big-time Buffalo fan, and talking about football, two young players I'm talking to, and they really need to step it up to become better tennis players. I've been working with both of them for 5 years, and one really liked football, and I told the other one, you should watch football. I really think that everyone in the States that's connected with sports should understand football. Offense, defense, the three teams. I just love in football, not to get off on a tangent, but okay, we're going to control the line of scrimmage. We're going to control the clock. Mm-hmm. Quarterback throws the ball, three things can happen. Two of them are bad. But just to watch the quarterbacks, how they handle, mistakes and how they rebound. Can you imagine if, give me the names, 15 for Kansas City.
Mahomes.
Yeah, East Texas kid. He played shortstop. You can just see when when he made that play and throwing the football, and he's almost horizontal. He's throwing the ball sideways. And can you imagine if he played tennis? Wow. But yeah, we got to get to basic shots, specialty shots, emergency shots. But a couple other things with Dr. Dom, research. 6 states. I thought it was 1. I think he thought it was 2, but he looked it up. There's 6 states that have P requirements. New York, Illinois, Massachusetts, Mississippi, Hawaii, and Vermont. Mm. But with that, is that elementary? You have to ask more questions. The peer researcher just keeps asking questions. Is that elementary, junior high, high school? How many times per week? And then also, they may have phys ed, but do you have alternatives? Do you have choices? Is it mandatory? It may be offered, but sometimes I know one of my boys went to a school where they had a choice between art, music, or PE. It was an elective. You could make a choice. But yeah, let's get into specialty shots and emergency shots.
I'll start with this, Steve. Tell the listeners what your favorite specialty shot is.
My favorite specialty shot? That's a good question. I like the Jimmy Connor skyhook.
The Jimmy Connor skyhook. I was going to give you some time to think about it with a little story, but the first time I came down to visit you in Tampa, the old Carrollwood Country Club, 15 years old, I didn't really have the best head on my shoulders, and was behaving like a brat, long story short, and you weren't feeling very well, so it was a combination of a difficult combination for me to be behaving the way I was, and you again not feeling very well that day. But I remember you sitting us down and asking me to ask you a question, and I'm slouched over in my chair, and I said, "Well, why is the sky blue?" That was not a very good question. And I was with Gabe Wapner. We've mentioned a few times in this podcast, but you then turned to Gabe and had him ask a question. You said a tennis question. And so my very next question was, what's your favorite shot? And I'm sure you remember the answer, but if it's still the same as the approach shot, but your favorite specialty shot is the skyhook, I think mine has to be the backwards overhead.
Bud Collins, the late Bud Collins, called the backward overhead. I'm sorry, no, I'm thinking of different shots. We'll get into that. That's the Rod Laver, the most difficult shot, very short hitting zone, where he was on the cover of Wheaties, the cereal, and that's the shot he was hitting, the reverse overhead. We have certain names for them. But backward overhead would be good. I was thinking of the Bucharest backfire. Ilya Nastasi from Bucharest. Granted, we should have a course. We will have a course on emergency shots. I don't think we cover that enough in Tennis Intelligence Applied, but when we play mini tennis, and we should have a podcast on mini tennis. So let me say we will have a podcast on mini tennis. Mini tennis with a medicine ball, mini tennis playing soccer, and on and on and on, different types of mini tennis. But we play what we call mini tennis 5, and to put the ball in play, you have to serve backwards. We mentioned once on the serve, Peter Burwash, very creative. First thing he does teaching beginners, he has them face the fence, not the net. He has them use a continental grip. If they're right-handed, they toss to the left. And it's just a way to have them use a continental grip and not be a palm upper, and logically, intelligently have the palm up and pulling down. Nadal is somebody, to date myself, Jimmy Connors, Nadal will hit a sky hook. In other words, it looks like they're playing cricket. In cricket, if you bend your arm, they call it a throw. And I know nothing about cricket. I've been, on TV, in person, in different countries watching cricket. And, it makes me think, do the foreigners know anything about baseball? I don't think it's the same as it when I was a kid. Even when I was a kid, if you didn't even play baseball, you knew baseball. It's amazing that you think about kids playing outdoors. You would start with kickball and then wiffle ball. And when I grew up, we had a baseball diamond in our backyard. The paths were all worn out, and across the street, our neighbors, the Hewitsons, they had a hockey rink. But basic shots, we've got to list those off. Do you think I really have to use my notes to look up the basic shots, Flanagan?
Hopefully our listeners know the basic shots as well.
Yeah, be brilliant with basics, Vince Lombardi. The forehand volley goes with a forehand ground stroke. The backhand volley goes with the backhand ground stroke. So that's a two-handed backhand volley and a two-handed backhand ground stroke. We make everyone go through that because even if they're a one-handed player on the backhand side, they have to be able to teach the two-handed backhand volley. They have to be able to demonstrate peer teaching. But most of the time what happens is the older players today, they have a two-handed backhand and a one-handed backhand volley. But when you just think, hey, we're working with a two-handed backhand volley, and they look at you cross-eyed and say, no, basically that's a return pattern. Then you have the one-handed backhand volley with the underspin backhand, the overhead with the serve. So if our listeners, we have the 42-second drill. That's 7 times 6 seconds a stroke. Obviously, the forehand volley takes a little less time than the forehand ground stroke, but people get the idea. Then the 48-second drill is just going 2, 2, 2.
We got a funny story about the two-handed backhand volley. I was working with a coach down here. He'll remain nameless for this podcast, but I was having players hit two-handed backhand volleys. And I know you've said I've heard you say this, where the USPTA at one point tried to make hitting two-handed backhands volleys illegal or against the teaching methodology. And so I have players hitting some two-handed backhand volleys, and I don't really see why you're doing that. They just lose so much feel of the ball. And he explained about the return of serve and how it helps stabilize the racket head and all this. Okay, fine. And then kind of flash forward, a couple weeks later, and he's working with some players to help them on their forehand volley. And he's having them hit a two-handed forehand volley, something he's done for years as a coach. And I said, well, it's kind of silly that you didn't want these players learning a two-handed backhand volley a couple weeks ago, and now you're teaching them a two-handed forehand volley. But it's a drill that I've used ever since. And talking about specialty shots and some creativity on the court, someone like Fabrice Santoro comes to mind with the two-handed forehand and also at times hitting a two-handed forehand volley. But I always thought that was an interesting story about the usually the resistance to teaching players the two-handed backhand volley.
Yeah, so many things. Santoro makes me think of Federer goes, well, I'm going to attack the forehand. I don't want to stay back and have to read it. I'm going to attack it. I think Federer statistically played some of his best tennis against Santoro. With, say, the 11, 12-year-old comes out, they're 5th, 6th grade, and they're a legend in their own mind, and they're with their mom, and you're doing some video work, and you say, well, initially to improve your one-handed backhand volley, I'm going to recommend that you hit a two-handed backhand volley. They look right at their mom. Mm-hmm. Does this guy know who I am? And I said, well, before we even look at the video, you're hitting your backhand volley two-handed anyway. It's just a safe bet that when a kid is very young, very slight built, they think they're hitting a one-handed backhand volley. But when you show them the film, say if they're right-handed, they're using it left-handed as a crutch. I mean, Las Vegas, the house wins the bet. With Dennis Vandermeer, quote, what a mastermind for tennis teaching. From basic shots, one grows specialty shots. And some key words, the framework. Dennis used to always say, get organized. So split step, not only organizing your feet, but organizing your hands. You get young players' attention when you say, look at Djokovic in the ready position. You just have to simplify. You just have to connect the dots. A great Vandermeer line is, and we've shared it many, many times, the interrelationship of strokes, the interrelationship of spins. Someone like, say, Federer, we would say he has a better ready position than Nadal. So when Roger turns, he has more disguise for a drop shot because he's centering the racket based on the grip he waits with. You think of someone like Coco Gauff and the grip she waits with, when she turns, she's got to do some rewiring. She's got to adjust the racket. So again, coming back to Vandermeer, from basic shots, one grows specialty shots. You know, and we have people at the beginning of practice, 5-5. You take 5 shots, with a forehand, a two-handed backhand, one-hand backhand, and a serve. I should say 4 shots, those 4 shots, and we just drop hit 5 forehands, hold your balance till the ball hits the fence. And then, you can say, okay, now drop hit an open stance forehand. Now bring the follow through behind your back. But it's the same ready position. It's the same unit turn. I remember being a young tennis teacher and everyone saying I was teaching everyone the same. And this was in Dallas, and I remember taking juniors with me. I could even tell you who they were and what their story was and how far they went with their tennis. I think of taking Julie Scott, who stayed with a two-handed forehand the whole way through. And I mean, she was a star at Stanford. She's on her course, Tennis Intelligence Applied, with total palm up overhead in the 7th grade. But having here's a kid who keeps his grip on 3. Here's a kid who has a grip on 3, an Eastern grip. When they turn, they change it to, the bottom. So one stays on 3, one goes to the bottom 3, one's all the way on 4. No such thing as a perfect grip, just a grip with the least amount of adjustment. Key phrases for specialty shots is racket head awareness, position awareness, opponent awareness, when to use specialty shots. And some of the shots we have listed, we certainly can add to that. But you want to read off the specialty shots?
Sure, yeah. We have the forehand drop volley, which I use at times to teach even beginners. Something that you see a lot of beginners do is they just take a massive swing at the volley and they just can't control the ball. And so I think to teach them forehand drop volley, sometimes it is an advanced shot, and it's great for advanced players to work on that, but also another way to help beginners improve their volley. Forehand drop shot, which again, I have used that same with beginners and intermediates to teach them just extreme backspin, underspin. Forehand half volley, which of course is now the opposite, a really closed racket face. Forehand conventional approach volley, which is a dying art, as my partner would say, Allington, my business partner, would say, ghosting in and hitting the approach volley. The forehand swing volley, I think of my buddy Andre Agassi, really one of the players who popularized that. Forehand approach shot, I think another dying art. So many players just setting up in an open stance and just cracking the ball from midcourt versus actually hitting a true approach shot. And the different spins you can use on that. Of course, you very rarely see anyone come in with an underspin forehand approach shot. You do see a few players do that on the backhand side. Forehand underspin lob, forehand topspin lob. Another two that just because of the realities of the court and that being transparent, when you get a group of intermediate players, beginner players on the court, they don't really quite conceptualize their target and where they should aim. And so having them practice lobs really early on in their development can be really helpful to understand that it's a lifting motion. And unless you're playing indoor tennis, which a lot of us around the world right now are doing with winter, but us lucky few in Florida are putting on our winter hats and big jackets. It's only 50, 55 degrees outside, 60 degrees outside. And the forehand topspin lob, which you mentioned, where the follow-through goes kind of behind the head, and you've seen Nadal do that on almost every forehand to increase the upward angle. But another shot that I've learned just to help people understand how you can really swing up on the ball to make the ball spin down. So I think, my takeaway from that is a lot of the work that I do on the court is with intermediate players, beginner players, and I've used specialty shots and the ability to teach specialty shots to help them improve their start in the game, to make sure they understand spins and understand different mechanics and even understand the realities of the court. But that's the forehand side.
Yeah, so you would just double it for the backhand side, but we'll go back to the top of the list. But before you do that, let me make some comments off your comments. Yes, I have to call myself a wimp. I think as a leader, you have to say my mistake first. And yeah, we have to toughen up. But you and I, Flanagan, are upstate New York boys. And I'm out there today with 3 layers of clothes, and I'm wearing a winter toque. What was the temperature today? 62.
Yeah, exactly.
There's a wind chill factor.
Right.
The
Humidity makes it feel a lot colder than 62. Yeah, for sure.
But Agassi, when Agassi first came on the scene, it was really taboo to play a swinging volley.
Right.
And it was like, that's against the rules, the unwritten rules. He didn't play a conventional volley. Right. He just hit everything. I told a young player today, I'd love to quote Agassi, I'd rather hit the ball in the bleachers than let the other person dictate the point.
It's only secondhand, but just talking about trick shots with Agassi, I was understanding someone was cracking serves at him. And if you can visualize this, he actually has a one-handed backhand where he's doing a full 360. I guess it's more of a 180, but he's doing a full 180, spinning around and hitting the backhand then again from the left side of his body. And he's making clean contact and hitting winners with it. I've been trying to do that ever since I heard that story. I've swung and missed every single time. So I'm no Andre Agassi.
Steve Young, not the quarterback, but Steve Young. He worked with me. He was a student, but he was with me for 5 years, based in Philadelphia now. He was there. It was Aaron Krickstein, who loves baseball, loves the Detroit Tigers, a Grosse Pointe, Michigan guy. And it's interesting. I was talking to somebody the other day about the late Tim Gullickson. So I've met people who coached Aaron when he was a kid and then know who coached him when he was on the pro tour. So they end up at a place where they have the baseball pitching machines, and Agassi goes, "Can I try that?" And radical Andre, teenager, goes, "Can you turn the machine up fast as it goes?" And the baseball players all stopped and watched. And he ran forward with a baseball bat, tennis swing, taking the balls out of the air.
It's crazy.
But that's just, the dad with a souped up ball machine, 2,500 balls a day. Mike Agassi, you got to read Mike's book before you read Andre's book. And with that, I think Andre Agassi to this day, I can remember him being able to hit through Nadal when he was 36 years old, but he just couldn't come in and finish. And Braden asked him one time, "Why don't you come in? You hit 3-4 great shots." And he goes, "Have you seen me volley?" You got to listen to what the pros say. So with Agassi, people can learn efficiency through fatigue. And you get, you're really tired and you're going to have the least amount of moving parts. Jim Larry used to say that, get your athletes where they're really sucking for air. They're gasping. They need oxygen. It's one of the best times to talk to a player. Get them gassed a little bit. But with Andre, also too, he had to find a way, because his dad was not a technician. So Andre's the youngest of 4. Tammy, who played at Tyler Junior College when I was there, so I saw her practice for a year. To her credit, that was a very high level. All these foreign players back in the day. And then she played at Texas A&M. So she was a really good tennis player, but very inefficient. And they're like, well, how did they end up hitting the ball so differently? But the story is where Mike Agassi, he bought the house before he didn't go in the house, just marked off the backyard, and there was a room for a ball machine. With Another thing with stories, today, one of the moms, it's a great idea. Said she got it from the University of Tennessee, where I believe, I have to ask, is it 100 shots in a row or it's just 100 shots? So a kid misses it 14 or 32 and you start all over. But she times how long it takes them to rally 100 balls. Mm-hmm. So this makes me think about the moon ball that's not on our list of specialty shots. Bud Collins, again, he used to call Harold Solomon the Solly Slop. His technique was not the best, but small guy, top 10 in the world. I tell people that I worked for Harold. But actually what I did was, for a week, I had to show up every morning, meet Harold and his wife, Jan, and I would hit with Jan while he worked out with someone else, and he would tell me what to do. And we're basically the same age, but I'm in my early 20s, he's in his early 20s, and he goes, we're going to go cross court. I go, okay, so I'm hitting cross court with his wife. And one of the sessions, this is at a tournament, so Connor shows up. It wasn't early in the morning, but we'd have this hitting session with Connors. So every time I hit the ball, those guys for every ball I hit, they were hitting 3. But Harold, what he would do is he'd throw up a high arcing ball. Mm. We have a film of Agassi saying, if you can hit this high arcing shot, it was basically known as a moon ball. Mm. And Andre's a teenager on this tape, and he's made with Bollettieri, and what's going to happen is trajectory makes the ball bounce high, so your opponent backs up, mm-hmm. and then Andre says, next shot, you can go on offense. And so he would hit one high arcing shot, but juniors missed the point. Mm-hmm. And you can do that all day long. We tell people when they go out and play in a match, a Bradenism is when you're warming up, try to send the first ball right down the middle, and they're going to let you know whether they like their forehand or backhand. Mm-hmm. We tell people, and you go out, game number 1, actually, even the first 4 games is, this wouldn't apply to pro tennis, but junior tennis is get rid of the butterflies, break sweat, let the other person know that you're going to keep balls in play, and throw the ball up high. And they got 3 choices. They can take it out of the air, and I tell them if they take it out of the air, call me up, I'll take you and your parents out to lunch. You throw up a moon ball and somebody comes in and plays a clean approach volley. I mean, you get a couple kids doing that. I mean, you could be in Florida and seriously be the only junior in Florida who does that. Mm-hmm. The other thing is they can stay in close to the baseline and play it on the rise. We had a Canadian kid who's 15 lose to a 12-year-old the other day. And the kid stayed close to the baseline. He had a lot of problems, especially on the forehand side, but he could hit spin. But the other one is if people just back up, if you throw a ball up high and your opponent's backed by the fence, I'm going, how could you lose? How could you lose? But when kids pick up the racket, generally at the beginning of a match, they're so nervous they have no idea. Mm-hmm. To make the little discoveries, to throw up the high arcing moon ball. Anyway, that's where Connors, why you'd hit so many balls, not only the speed of shot, but it's just a bounce hit rhythm. Mm-hmm. Braden used to always say it's 50-50. The time span between when the ball's hit by the opponent and then when the ball bounces and then when the shot's returned. Back in the day when everyone used to smoke cigarettes, all adults, it was terrible. But Pancho Segura used to say you could light a cigarette and how long it takes that kid to hit the ball between the time it bounces and the time they hit it. I mean, it really should just be a bounce hit rhythm. That's like the half volleys on here. The half volley is, like today you can't say that where kids know what you mean. Softball, baseball, it's like the shortstop playing a short hop. You charge the ball and they just don't know. So we do a drill, we call it Billie Jean King shortstop. And we tell the kids, okay, put your racket down, and we just ground the ball out and then just see if they can catch it. And then, even so, catch it on 3 bounces, catch it on 2 bounces, and then just pick it up and then rifle it, throw it. Like a kid playing shortstop. Billie Jean King, people should know, when she was a young kid on a boys team, she was playing shortstop, and usually the best athlete is playing shortstop. Why? They're just going to get the most balls. Back to the top of the list, so forehand drop volley. There's information, there's applied information. Here's a great idea. You feed a ball to a kid, and this comes from Burwash. They hit a forehand volley, and they should be able to catch the ball in their left hand. So they're righty. They hit a forehand volley, and they have to catch it in their left hand. Then you know they're not going to be swinging. You don't want to use a continental grip. I know the USTA, I went to their high performance course, and I passed, so now I'm a high performance coach.
Finally.
Yes, no, actually, I'm a high performance coach. I go, hi, I'm Steve, I'm a low performance coach. But with, you soften the grip, and you can use a composite grip. Jose Agassi, who has a voice within the USTA, it's almost a continental grip. So right within the USTA, okay, that should just stop the argument. A true continental grip opens the racket face 45 degrees. Granted that if a kid's going to play mini tennis and play the wrong way, they can play A-OK playing with a continental grip. We Americans playing mini tennis on a hard court, it doesn't look the same as kids playing mini tennis on a red clay court. They're sliding with an open stance and they're hitting top, and it just looks like miniature pro tennis when you're playing mini tennis the right way. Softening the grip, you bring the hand back into your body. Vandermeer used to say, you like ice cream? You get the barrel of ice cream and you have to cup the ice cream. But you don't make that cupping action from your wrist, you make it from your shoulder. The testing, years ago with the USPTA, you feed a ball to someone and the ball has to bounce 3 times in the service box. Connors used to do this. You throw the ball up, and there's so many pros who can do it. Throw the ball way up high. He's on the stadium court. Ball comes down, and he catches it on his strings without the ball bouncing. You can do that with just tossing the ball up high, and you bring the racket and the ball down at the same time. But coming back to Don wanted us to mention deliberate practice, you have to practice these shots. So there's, with application, with one idea, then there's another idea. When you're going to have people drop hit a forehand ground stroke, you can have them drop shots. So you can, Vandermeer, again, specialty shots grow from basic shots. So Vandermeer would have a kid self-feed a forehand drop volley. You're up at the net, and it goes 1, 2, 3. There's a ball bounce 3 times. Then you go back, and you just let the ball bounce, and now it's a drop shot. Now, I think with drop shots, coming back to the moon ball that was enlisted, but what you really want to do is hit that high moon ball. Say, for example, could be righty to righty, forehand to forehand. You hit a high cross-court moon ball. Kid moves back. So you want to get your opponent way behind the baseline. Arthur Ashe used to say a lot of times a drop shot is the player's just copying out. They won't stay in the rally. But what you want to do is you want to set up a drop shot. So you hit the high arcing shot, especially shot to move the person back. And then when you hit a drop shot, you want to be about 3/4 court. You want to be inside the baseline. And actually, when you hit it, Everett was great at this, it's really more of an invitation shot. And I know from teaching kids for so long, you have to explain what you're saying. You say, well, your opponent's going to be like a fish out of water. Well, the kid's never been fishing, and they don't know what a fish out of water looks like. The fish is not too happy to be out of water. So then when your opponent comes to the net, and they don't come to the net, Vic Braden, they come every other April. They come up here every other April, and they just hit the ball right at them. It's amazing how many kids don't understand most passing shots. Try to win on the second passing shot. If you're in the warm-up and a kid's got really strong continental grips, they're going to finesse volleys. You just know. I saw Sam Querrey playing on TV today, and what a great server. He was more like he's playing in the 35s. Actually, he played the Australian Open with Austin Krajicek. So he's a big serve, and he plays one-up, one-back doubles. And I remember watching him when he was 14 years old and go, he's going to finesse every volley. I remember talking to the powers to be with the USTA and going, well, in the future, you wouldn't want to have this. You wouldn't want to have the Sam Querreys of the future volley that way. Well, what do you mean? Well, he can't stick it. But actually, most people, they don't really know how to hit a drive volley. Bill Murphy, Chet Murphy, 2 brothers, they did so much in the 60s as far as tennis education. And we talked about that in one of the previous podcasts. Snap volley, drag volley, swing volley, cup volley. And you have to be able to do it all. So, but if you have that core, that ready position, but having the drop shot not barely land over barely past the net. It's like, well, I just had to hit the net skimmer. No. Back when we used conventional rackets, we just take, say, just about the width of the racket. So 9, now it's bigger. The rackets are a little bit bigger, but, I tell people, you can go a foot over the net, get them so far back, you're in, and you're basically trying to bring them to a part of the court that they don't want to play in. And, there's probably no better way to get a player frustrated is bring them in and make them dump a volley. And then, when they're in and they don't like the volley, what's listed here as a specialty shot is the lobs. So then you put shots together. So say it's a green light point, you're up by 2 or more points. You don't have to always attack where the math's on your side to take a risk. Okay, you're going to play this pattern. You're going to hit a high moon ball. You're going to bring your opponent to the net, and then you're going to throw up a high lob. When you have juniors play move up the river, down the river, winners move up, losers move down. Say that politically correct. The winners move up and the non-winners move down. Juniors never even stop and think about which way the wind's blowing or where the sun is. You get an experienced senior player out there, they go, well, how do you decide? Do you spin for racket? What the side you could be on? And I just say, no, you don't have to do that. Just, take whatever side you want because the juniors don't know any better. Just climb your way to the top. With 4.5 volleys, really, I don't think it should be called a half volley. It should be called a half ground stroke. You think, okay, linear pattern for volleys, circular pattern for ground strokes. Going back to McEnroe. McEnroe was a player playing doubles that he would be able to take the half volley and bring his racket up behind his head, just like you would with a topspin lob, because he would want the ball to dip down at their feet. But you got to teach the half volley to turn into an approach shot as well. To get people to be able to play half volleys, the very best players in the world, a lot of times their ground strokes look like a half volley because they're just bounce, hit. They're just taking the ball on the rise. A John Newcomb drill years ago, be inside the baseline and just pound the ball down the middle. Try to quickly turn. I mean, footwork solves just about every problem in tennis. But the half volley visual acuity is you could have people run around a cone and their back is to the net, and then you feed the ball. So when they come out, they turn around and the ball's right at their feet. So you have to find ways to practice half volleys. I think of Bob Lutz years ago, pretty casual, pretty slow getting to the net. Stan Smith, Bob Lutz, at one time, arguably the best doubles team in the world. Side story with that is that Peter Fleming, John McEnroe, they play Smith and Lutz, tangent. And Peter Fleming idolized Stan Smith. So McEnroe, they've only played 2 games. And McEnroe goes to Fleming. These guys suck. John McEnroe. But I think of my son Connor, he was a little slow getting to the net, and then you can develop half volleys. I don't think you have to get people to wear ankle weights so they're slow getting to the net. But I think today you find so many kids because of their grips and the ready position. And also too, I think with indoor tennis, a lot of kids, they don't play mini tennis. We teach basics, and right away we say, okay, go play mini tennis. And then we'll say, okay, play 50% tennis where you can't hit winners. But half volleys, if you, on the forehand side, you have your racket go out towards the target, the half volley can become an approach shot. You have to be able to play it that way. Then tennis terminology, you think a forehand, half volley, approach shot. So you have to enter the student's world. Like, okay, let's go through the forehand first. Okay, so you know what a forehand is. And then the similarities, that just helps from a teaching standpoint. Go ahead, Flanagan, make a comment. What do you got?
Well, coming back to the volley, I think just another one that we could add is Pete Sampras.
I've heard of him.
You've heard of him?
Yeah.
Just talking about his biography with someone downstairs before this, but not the most exciting personality, not the most exciting biography, but when he was really pulled wide on the volley, he was hitting topspin. And I think that's a sign, number one, obviously where he was on the grip for his forehand volley, but also the farther you reach out away from your body, the more the racket face closes. So it's actually much harder to then hit that volley flat or with underspin. But that's another shot too that I'm not sure that gets mentioned or that's even taught. I mean, I think the only volley that players are practicing is the ones that fed right to them. But you see that more, obviously, Sampras era and before, Pat Rafter would do that, really reaching for a volley and you hit it with top.
I coached a player who played at UCLA, Stella, Sampras, class act, Rance Brown. A player I worked with, they wanted her to lead with the edge. And said, like Pete. And the player goes, well, and the player had practiced with Pete. The player said, well, I don't think Pete does that. So they looked at film. And the player was right. Jim Courier said one time, I don't think we'll ever see someone volley like Sampras again, where they come in and hit the ball flat. And it's like, why not? It's amazing. I don't think that, like say, I've heard Vielander say, people will never play like Jimmy Connors again. Why not? As far as talking about a lost art, Connors coming in and playing that conventional approach volley. We were doing that the other day where you're feeding a moon ball and the kids, all they're doing is feeding, catching, and they're going back. They jog backwards, work the legs, so you combine fitness with technique. And tactic, green light point, 130 degrees. The listeners are putting all these pieces of the puzzle together, all the homework we've done with different tennis teachers. And Connors, he would take all those stutter steps. What great footwork. His uncle was a boxer. Connors had what the carpenters have. It's called a horse. It's
Sawhorse.
Sawhorse. I think it's 32 inches. And when he was a kid, the fitness was in the garage, just jumping over that side, 2 feet up and over, up and over. I mean, we're working with some kids who can't jump over a popsicle stick. You measure an athlete by how they can jump. I mean, if you don't skip rope every day, you're not a tennis player. You don't have a skip rope in your bag, you're not a tennis player. And we tell people, it comes from Kramer, the boxing, just do 12 minutes. And really, if you think it only takes 11. 3 minutes on, 1 minute off, do 3 rounds a day, and have a place where you check off if you do that. Winners and losers. This is a routine. This is what you're told to do. I ask kids all the time, I said, if it's said on your sleeve, how many days have we known you? And we could look it up because we film people on day one, and we have a file for that. And how many days have we known you, and how many days have you done that scoop rope routine? Where you and I spent a lot of time, the HCC Tennis Center, it's really sad. I was there. Joe Curtis, the coach at Jesuit, great guy. I think he's been there. I was talking to Scott Reed the other day, who was a volunteer coach for them. We came up with, I think, Scott knew exactly the first year. I think he's been there 25 years now. So we go back and the backboards are no longer there. There's a huge backboard and there was racquetball courts and train of thought, brain cramp, testing you. You were there.
Backboards, Jesuit.
With
Joe Curtis.
Joe Curtis. I haven't seen your moment. I was on a roll. Got to help me back. You got to bring me back, Flanagan. With
well, I'll talk about the backboard for a second. It is too bad. It's another as far as tennis centers. I mean, like you said before, they don't make any money, so they're not building them anymore. But another great way to practice your specialty shots is off a backboard. Yeah,
we'll get into that, especially the emergency shots. But no, having kids practice that way. You feed up a moon ball, and they come in. So Connors would take the stutter steps, waiting for it to come down. Okay? I mean, coming back to the backboard, you have to take. It's like the ball's going to the net and coming back. Connors would hit every day against the backboard in the wintertime, and he hit off a wooden surface. Mark Walpole mentioned that the other day, or the last podcast, or the podcast before that, playing on wood. You can play situational drills. If you went to our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied, throw up a moon ball, take it out of the air. Then you can even say, okay, take the first passing shot down the line, stick the volley back up, percentage line, percentage post, and then play the point out. And that's where you're combining predictable with non-predictable, or non-competitive with competitive practice. Coming back to mini tennis, the mini tennis 5, where you stop the ball and hit it a second time. I mean, I love that drill. And what a fitness drill. And the kids have fun with it. And all of a sudden they're stopping it like a volley. And they stop it with their forehand side, put the left hand on the racket. Maybe they are stopping it with a grip on 3 and they need the left hand to go to the grip on 4. But the Australians in the year 2000, I think, or maybe it was just called Australia 2000 tapes. They had film of Sampras coming in and just gliding through it. So we do this drill where you toss balls underhand, say 8 to be great. We had a Facebook post a couple of days ago about the book 8 to be great. It's a great short video. You should look it up on GreatBase Facebook and scroll back a few days. But with our players just look great when they do that. But then when they play, we have so many kids that are stopping or they're running around the backhand volley. With, getting people to play swing volleys, hand-fed balls, is have people, you could feed balls, you could be the pro on the other side of the net. The other thing, too, is that you can have juniors feed balls. And when we said it before, when juniors, they're a righty, so they should put their left hip on the basket and they go over to feed balls. You can just tell in a second that they've never fed balls before. I like what Mark Walpole said, where just have someone feed a ball, and then if they know a little bit about tennis. They can't feed a ball. All these things, going back to King Richard, I watched Richard Williams feed balls, and you knew that he was totally new to tennis, but he was feeding balls. He wasn't, he certainly looked like a beginner at it, but that's with parents, just hand-fed balls. If you can feed breadcrumbs to a pigeon, you can feed balls. But getting people to take the ball out of the air, even when you drop hit balls, you don't have to let the ball bounce. If you want to get somebody to get the racket head below the ball, get them to have 3 balls, run forward, and just hit balls out of the air. And then a Braden drill for the half volley is just drop the ball 2 inches. And it's just that rhythm of the shortstop, bounce hit, bounce hit. It's a bounce hit rhythm. But again, it all comes back to, do you have a ready position? Do you have a unit turn? And the swing has to be short and compact. Basically, when you teach tennis, you're not adding movements, you're subtracting movements. That's why we film. And we tell people, if you're a total beginner, we don't have to film you. We have a young kid who's come out a few times. I know one of your coaches, Jason's been working with him, a young kid, great name, Lincoln. And, so if someone's 5, 6 years old, you don't necessarily have to film him, but he's already played quite a bit of tennis, so
right.
we should film him.
Can we back up and talk a little bit about how drop hitting the ball out of the air, just the physics behind that, the science behind how drop hitting the ball out of the air will help a player get below the ball?
Well, the ball's falling. So you want the racket to free fall. You want to have the shoulder loose. You want to play with gravity. So even when you watch kids drop a ball, sometimes they toss the ball up in the air and go, no, it's going to bounce too high. You want to play it at waist level. So actually, when you have people pair up and there's partners, you just have a person just hang on the ball and just drop it straight down. Don't toss it, because you're going to toss it right into them. You want to have them swing away from their body. So there's an art to feeding every which way. So, when a kid turns, okay, let's see, you just do it out of the air, they have to simplify the stroke, and the ball is falling. The ball is going downward. When you do it the basic way, or what most people do, the ball's bounced, the ball's coming up, and kids will logically just swing in at waist level.
Yeah. So when the ball's falling too, is it also easier to then create spin because the ball's falling down as your racket's going up?
Yeah, for sure. That's what it's all about, is getting the racket hit below the ball. When the ball hits the court, it ascends and it descends. So you really want the spin and speed to dissipate. Lendl was a person who would do that. He was so good. Actually, I think of Bill Jacobson, talked to him not too long ago. What a mastermind. But Jacobson, he knew that Lendl was so stubborn that his numbers were great coming in. Mm-hmm. But he didn't believe in the stats. I mean, he didn't believe in his own numbers. I mean, he was winning big time. But his thing was to just break people's legs down. And he was just over the top with fitness. He took fitness to a completely different level. I mean, that's a podcast in itself. Yeah. I one time was teaching in Asheville, and Lawson Duncan, real quiet guy. Chuck Creasy mentioned Lawson Duncan the other day, and so it was a rainy day, and there was a group of people, and I said, Lawson, what was it like to practice with Lendl? And it was fantastic. So it was like 45 minutes to an hour. He just talked about practicing with Lendl. They'd get up, they'd go for a 20-mile bike ride, and then they would come back and have breakfast, but they would play 2 matches per day, best of 5 sets.
Wow.
Pete Sampras talks about that. It had a lot to do with his career, that he went to train with Lendl, and he's just crazy. There's people who didn't survive. They went, but I got to go. I can't stick this.
Coming back to the falling ball, someone like Nadal who stands, farther back on clay. Of course, he'll stand farther back at Roland Garros than he does, at Wimbledon or the U.S. Open. But so as he's standing farther back and he's playing the ball, it's falling more. That allows him to then create more RPMs, correct?
Right. If you're playing the ball on the rise, you really have to stabilize yourself to the ground, really have to keep your head still. Say it's the forehand side, you just don't want to open up. It's much more forgiving when you're behind the baseline. Welby Van Horn, with young tennis players, he taught young tennis players to stay behind the baseline and let the ball drop and just learn to rally.
Right.
Just learn to let the other person miss. Vic Braden used to say, let the other person take gas. I think that's a really sad thing with especially kids who don't play when they're really young, really slight of built. They just muscle the ball. I was watching 2 young guys today, 15 years old, and I said, you guys have no idea about relaxation skills. I mean, have you ever watched other sports? I know where you and I trained in Tampa. It was right next to where the Yankees played baseball. I think the most relaxed people in sport are third basemen. And my brother Mike used to say back in the day, the statistician for the New York Rangers, because he was assistant hockey coach for them, would turn around and work for the Mets. And baseball players, they're so good mentally because they lose so much. They play 162 games.
Yep.
But they get on the bus to the airport, going, where are we going today? And it's just amazing how uptight. It's just kids get so stressed out.
I think also too, if you're a Hall of Famer, if you're successful at bat 3 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
And so 7 out of 10, quick math there, Furman College, 7 out of 10 times you're failing at your job.
Yeah.
And so I think I've mentioned that with players before, because there's so many times players they're just trying so hard to win every single point. And of course you don't want to try to lose the point, but you also need to do some things during a match to discover how to beat your opponent. And like you said, how to frustrate your opponent, which another topic entirely, but players don't really ever think outside themselves.
3 times you don't want to miss: hitting the second serve, returning the second serve, playing an approach shot. We call the approach shot the anxiety shot. The court's only 27 feet wide. You divide it in half, 13 and a half feet. Let your opponent hit the passing shot. Okay? But, people are going for the $100 shot from the 10-cent position. Now, we do a drill, attack, counterattack, serve underhand. The attacker comes in, they're going to be playing approach shots, volleys, and overheads. The counterattacker is going to play passing shots and lobs. Play the approach shot. Don't make it a point-ending shot.
Right.
And that's where tennis kids, they get stuck in the mud, because in the early years, they get wired. It becomes instinctive for them not to have an approach shot. So we say, okay, we got to teach the footwork for 5 basic approach shots. Now, say, for example, the framework, we mentioned that word, getting organized, ready position, the framework. There's a young boy here who's 2 in Canada. And basically, he was in a tournament the other day where there's a kid a year younger. One was in the finals of consolation. One was in the finals of the main draw. And there was a lot of, 15, 16-year-old kids in the tournament, and UTR tournament. Well, the kid we're coaching has very good framework for strokes. But he's not loose. He's not letting the racket free fall. He's really not getting away from the ball, give himself good spacing. The other kid, oh my word, for him to really be good, winning's confusing. He's a redo. Overhead, serve, forehand volley, backhand volley. Pretty close on the 2-handed backhand, which is common. And, someone who's, say, that unorthodox on the forehand side, if you look at pro tennis, you really don't see that many people. You mentioned Santoro. You get people that well, how did they climb all the way to the pros? So that does happen. But with the approach shot, the tabletop approach shot, people say, well, it doesn't happen anymore. Well, you're going to use that tabletop approach shot on a return of serve pattern. You think of Connors to Agassi to Djokovic, standing really close, ready position, unit turn. Coming back to Bud Collins, steal the ace. What a great line. So even within a basic shot like the return of serve, the serve is first, the return of serve is second. Braden used to always say the third most important shot is the approach shot because everybody hits short. Vic had a funny story about that is if you call someone up to play and they say hello, attack. Because if they're home, that means they hit short. If they don't answer the phone, that means they're on the tour. They're not home. Everybody hits short. And, people hit short, if you go out and you play the depth game, you play, say, for push-ups, kids will start to arc a ball over the net. If you hit short, most kids are playing points, they're hitting ground strokes that land inside the service box. And they're not even aware of it because they're just so wrapped up in the score.
I think one case you see the pros do it all the time on a as far as a tabletop approach that is off a drop shot retrieval, and then there's just so many players who just aren't even comfortable using that grip period on any shot.
Yeah, say for example, situational training. We'll do this with a kid. I've done this with highly ranked juniors that they're sent to work with me, and it's pretty much a captive audience because they got off an airplane, they've checked into a hotel. The parents don't really know where they are, but they've been sent to work with me. And I said, all right, we've watched you play. We're going to have you play a set, and the only shot you can hit topspin on is a serve. Go play a set. Maybe we'll even say, okay, play best 2 or 3 tiebreakers, but you can't hit topspin. And they're just stuck in the mud because the way they're hanging onto the racket, they can't grip and rip, load and explode. We have another young kid here from Canada, and it's just like, how many YouTube clips have you watched? You want to be loose on the serve like you are, which serves pretty good, but the forehand, that comes back to the comment, well, if that was a snake going in a hole, I'd say, okay, that's how the snake goes in the hole. Let's film it and look at it in slow motion. But off the framework of playing an approach shot, where it's like a volley with an added follow through, from that, you could play a side spin approach shot. People need to respect like Jack Kramer and Jimmy Connors, how they played the approach shot. Welby Van Horn, who grew up playing doubles, same age as Jack Kramer. Braden idolized Kramer. I had a chance to meet Jack Kramer. First time I ever taught for Vic, I taught with Jack Kramer's oldest son. Then I had a chance to teach his younger son the Braden system. And I said to Welby, what was Kramer's approach shot like? He goes, when you hit it on the forehand or backhand side, if you hit short, you just turn and ask the ball boy, what's the score now? Because he was just going to hit the spot. Yeah. And that's where the Braden, we call it percentage post, but Vic used to say 4x4 corner, just aim for the inside of that 4x4. And then measure that. Vandermeer, we're going to feed you 10 approach shots, and we're going to get a partner. So you get 3 people, one feeding, one hitting it, and the other person has to mark where the shots land. And people can't hit targets. They don't train to hit targets. We put the 5 targets on the court. Steve Denton, we have to get Steve Denton on our podcast. I love how he says how people see the court. He will say, I'm trying to teach kids how to see the court. And, the geometry of the court and the angles, you got to be closer to get in. You got to get into the net to get the angle. But on approach shots, you're going to have to improvise. We'll get into emergency shots, but if you can run forward and play a conventional volley, to take it right out of the air, take the stutter steps like we said about Connors, where you're going to let the ball drop. So now the racket face is vertical. If you reach up, the racket face is open. Angle the racket face up, angle the racket path down. And you can tell by the sound of the ball being hit if the kid takes the stutter steps, because you want to not only want the racket face to be aligned vertically, but you want to have the momentum forward, just like the power sources on the volley. The speed of the incoming ball in the movement forward. And most kids, because they have the elbow in, like say on the forehand side, a continental grip, the racket's going down. So they didn't change the racket face, they changed the racket path. And a coach can say it till they're purple, blue in the face, and running out of air, that the kid's going to not close in because they don't have the mechanics to close in. But with that, again, Vandermeer, if you have basic shots, so now you have a conventional, you have a volley, so now you have a conventional approach volley. So now you have an approach shot. Now then go out and you have kids, okay, serve. Every time this kid's serving, okay, you go play a set, you get one serve and You're the server. You got to serve and stay back. You're going to be the counterattacker. And the person on the other side has to come forward. Coming back to a visiting player, Bud Collins again, the kid's got an Hawaiian grip. You know, Hawaii is way to the west of California. And the kid is just, you know, they're rubbing the racket against their earlobe and they won't be able to play the shot. You know, they're going to be so one-dimensional, but they don't know it. They're talking about the UTR. It's like we got to have to come up with a very good acronym for the UTR. I think we have a very good one for the ITF, idiots traveling foolishly. You don't need to be going all over the map if you can't hit these shots. But the footwork, you're going to run forward, turn, take crossover steps. You'll do that on the forehand, tabletop, forehand, top spin. The two-hander on both sides, but then the one-handed approach shot where you step underneath, not the karaoke, Andres Barbosa, Miami, the karaoke step. But can you imagine having kids going out and drop hitting? If you teach people to drop hit an underspin backhand, we do at the beginning and the end of practice usually. And so now toss the ball and step underneath. And it's not just to play the ball down the line. Tennis is a game hitting straight line shots. You know, you ask a kid for questions, you ask a kid for answers. So you're going to have kids play a cross-court, underspin, backhand approach shot, one-handed. And here are the reasons, okay? Taking speed off the shot. Now you're in movement to the net. You keep the ball low. Trajectories keeps the ball low. And then your opponent's getting 50% of their pace from your pace. But kids aren't doing that. They're just blasting approach shots. You know, then when you get people to drop hit an approach shot and say, now hit it and then sprint. You can come through the shot, you finish the shot, sprint, and get to the GVP, the good volume position, 10 feet from the net. And then what do? You get right in the ready position. And, you know, coming back to, say, a drop volley, top of the list, is you need proximity to the net. You know, what surface is the best for drop volleys? Grass. Typically, when you hit a drop volley, you really want your opponent so far out of the court. It's just a sure thing that you're going to hit a drop volley. You know, for the longest time, Federer, he did work with Agassi at one point, and Agassi convinced him otherwise. That Federer, early in his career, was saying, I think the drop shot should be against the rules. And I think that's very, very important. I think Brad Gilbert with Murray, one time they were both in the booth after a Murray win, and Murray said, well, I didn't think you wanted me to play drop shots. He goes, no, you can play drop shots, but it's where and when. Mm-hmm. You know, he got his opponent way out of the court. You're playing the drop shot. The drop shot can be a very offensive shot if you use it correctly. I think of Connors playing Pancho Gonzalez, and he got Gonzalez tired. And what's the most difficult movement is up and back. So he got him tired. Gonzalez is in his 40s, and you know that's where they said Jimmy's going to win because he didn't care. He's going to hit a drop shot and throw up a lob, drop shot and a lob. There's a famous story about that with Bobby McKinley, younger brother Chuck McKinley. Chuck McKinley died at a young age of leukemia, wins Wimbledon the first time he plays it. And they all grew up in the St. Louis area, and Chuck, he plays Connors, and they're in the juniors. He's a little bit older, but he drop shots and lobs Connors, drop shots and lobs. And afterwards, Gloria Connors went up to Bobby, and she's giving him the finger like Jimmy used to wave his finger at his opponent. Well, he learned that from his mother, his grandmother. And I know someone I used to say, you point your finger all the time, and the person looked at it right back at him. He said, no, I don't. So but anyway, Gloria Connors went up to Jimmy and said, you will never beat my son that way again. She just took it as a lesson. But what he was doing is using specialty shots. He was arcing the ball, pushing the back deep, bringing to the net, throwing up the lob. Jeremy Wurtzman, Greg Yahaya. Greg Yahaya, great guy, teaching pro. Jeremy was a pretty good player. You know, he won a title in the 14s, gold ball. And it was right along the same line. I think, Jeremy might say, no, it was a couple years before that. But Yahaya's a teaching pro, and I remember he's such a nice guy, and he's playing Wurtzman, and he's working on his backhand. We've been helping him with his backhand, and he goes, I said, "This is how you're going to play him." He goes, "No, I like to just play straight up." I go, "Yahya, this is how you're going to play him." And Yahya beat him. And to this day, I mean, bring that up with Jeremy Wurtzman. I said, "You remember when Yahya beat you?" Because you could in the book Shepard Mead, he wrote a book that was famous in the 50s, How to Succeed in Business Without Really Trying. But then he wrote a book, How to Succeed in Tennis Without Really Trying. And there's two ways to play. You can spoil a player, you can stretch a player. Now, Agassi, you think, is always hitting out and stretching player. That's what juniors try to do, always play big, play TV tennis. Mm-hmm. But Agassi does say, give the opponent the shots that they don't want. And that's what's really gone away, where we say the mushroom. The guy who's got the big floppy hat, and he's got the band around his elbow, and he's got the pot belly. And, he's going to dink the ball deep, chop the ball, bring the guy to the net, throw up the lob. And he's going to bring the junior up to the net who's got it used to be with Nadal at one point, a kid could have his shoes, his shorts, his shirt, his wristband, his headband, and the shoulder bag. They'd all match. And the kid was a young hotshot, and it's like, no, I've got this guy over here. He's 57 years old, and he's 67 pounds overweight, and he's going to win.
I feel like there's a John Redkay story hidden somewhere in this.
Oh, my word.
Is that a flashback or what?
John Redkay, he was the best in Florida in the 3.5s. And the thing is he played baseball, and he's a really good baseball player. And, as a senior, he's playing baseball, playing hardball. And I remember my son, Mikhail, who was, if not one, I mean, he was two in the little kid groups, the 10s and 12s in Florida. He was a star. I mean, he used to not lose tournaments. And so he plays Redkay, and Redkay beats him. Just totally, just a palm-up push and dinking the ball, lobbing the ball. Everything's a lob. Those people are hated in social tennis, and they have a house full of trophies. And I remember telling my son, Mikhail, I can tell you how to beat him. And I said, if you do this and this and this, I'll tell you how to beat him. And sure enough, he did. I mean, very next match, he just gave him the strategy on how to do that. But you've got to hit high and deep. You got to hit high and deep. If you hit short, if you hit a minus, it's very easy for a player to hit a drop shot. But if you get in the ball where they're way behind the baseline, then they're going to hit a drop shot, and it's coming. It's coming. And then they're a senior. That's where you get in the drop shot, but let's talk about the lobs, underspin lobs.
My turn?
Your turn. I mean, the top spin lob is also is number 8. Go for it.
Well, I call them defensive and offensive lobs too when I'm teaching them. I have one's hitting a defensive situation. The other one is, you're maybe a little more neutral. It's certainly not, you're not in an offensive position when you're doing it. The window shrinks quite a lot if you move forward. But no, as I said before, I think it's a great teaching tool. Just got to be careful that you don't hit too many over the fence when you're coaching beginners. But there's down in Florida, there's no danger of hitting the ceiling, but the technique on an underspin lob really helps reinforce the long, upward hitting zone, low to high. It's ultimately high, low, high, but with an open racket face, and you then get a player then to just change the grip, change the angle of the racket, and make the same swing. The topspin lob, I think of Agassi again. I think of Leighton Hewitt. But I think the problem now is you don't see so many topspin lobs because players just aren't coming to the net that much. Hewitt and Agassi, their era, you had a few more net rushers. But I also think of being in Boston, watching some players practice there. Christo Schultz and Bud Schultz and Eric Buderak, and they were just talking about how players in doubles now, they obviously close in so tight, and it's no longer really a topspin lob. It's just a high topspin ground stroke, and then they're just getting it up and down over their head quicker, so they don't have time to run back and hit an emergency shot. But I always remember that as well with the topspin lob, just to get the ball up and down quick. No, I don't think you want players hitting lobs as they're moving forward. Obviously, it's not a very smart time to do it. But the technical and the tactical side, and to even, like you said, the moon ball, it's essentially, in many respects, just a topspin lob. just done without the other player at the net. I guess the strict definition is the lob is hit over someone else's head, but
Yeah. Oh, Bud Schultz, what a great story. I think he got to be 35, 40 in the world, never played a junior tournament, went to Bates, played basketball, played tennis. Obviously so athletic. There's a lot to be said about playing with wooden rackets. Get people to practice with a wooden racket. Because, these kids, it's like they have a weapon, a Babolat, commercial for Babolat. Christo, he spent time with us, and, just if you think, okay, this is how the old man played. And, Christo, lefty, Eric Burak, what a great story. But I just think of Bud Schultz. I was at the first pro tournament that he won, but he would come in. He was just so athletic. But, actually, with this year's Australian, Max Cressy, I know that he spent time with Matt Clore. Andy Fitzell traveled with him. He spent, I guess, 3-4 weeks with us. And, it's to me, it's just like, really? He's bringing serve and volley back. I mean, how did it ever go away? And say it in women's doubles, please. I mean, come on. You need two things to be a serve and volley. You need a serve and you need a volley. I mean, it's just baffling. It's just baffling. But with Rajiv Ram is, I think what I've said it before on this podcast, Mike Costa, they were never at Illinois at the same time. I think that I think Mike Costa, Nathan Zeter leave, and Rajiv Ram and Riley Hart come in. So Tyler was recruiting, the freshmen coming in were a little better than the seniors going out. But I remember, I've never had anything to do with Rajiv Ram's game, but I was at the 14s, Fort Lauderdale Tennis Club clay courts. It rained, whatever, and I was with a kid from the Midwest. So next thing I know is I'm feeding balls, and this kid, Rajiv Ram, is on the court. I'm just feeding balls to a group of kids, and he was one of them. He wins the tournament going away. I mean, people should watch him play. They call him Rompras because he just watched tapes of Sampras. What Costa used to say about him is that he was so relaxed that he would yawn in between volleys. That's why people should watch the guy. And, he's still, again, going strong in the Australian Open. But anyway, I was with Blake Wilmarth, and he was ranked 1 in the Midwest. And Rajiv Ram's from Indiana, so he's from the Midwest. But Rajiv Ram wasn't even playing. I was one time feeding balls at Indian Wells, shagging balls. I guess I was with Austin Krychek. He was practicing with Rajiv Ram. And I said, Rajiv Ram, remember Blake Wilmarth? He goes, yeah. He was ranked 1. He ended up playing at Colgate, played his freshman year, sophomore year, didn't make the lineup. I can't tell you how many times I've grinded kids where they made the lineup as a freshman, sophomore year, they don't make the lineup, and then they quit. So I called him up, the coach, his parents. But anyway, it's a fun story. Mark Bay, who does a lot of great things. He's the Nick Bollettieri of Chicago. I mean, he's just a mover and shaker in Chicago tennis, and does some TV work now. He's done USPTA film work, and he's worked with the Bryan brothers. So Mark Bay. I'm with Riley Hart, who's in the 14s, and Blake Wilmarth. I remember before we went, Wilmarth, they play a practice match, and the kid from the Midwest beats the kid from Florida. But he just hit the ball really well. He was clean. It wasn't, say, as athletic as some of the guys. So I'm watching Wilmarth play, and Mark Bay comes up to me and goes, I hate this kid's game. I just let him keep going. I go, why do you hate his game? And he's going on and on. And so then he said, well, who are you here with? I said, I'm with Riley Hart, and I'm with Blake Wilmarth. So anyway, but now Rajiv Ram, watch Rajiv Ram Jr. is the guy, he must take a lot of chill pills. But the kids are just so uptight. With most kids are just hitting topspin lobs. I think a very important point to make, and that's why I mentioned Rajiv Ram, is you need to be able to hit all these different lobs. Rajiv Ram would play a backhand lob approach shot. So, someone's coming to the net. Instead of hitting passing shot, he, hits the underspin lob as an offensive shot, underspin. Laver used to do that. Lob over the backhand side. You got 4.5 more feet if you're going on the diagonal with a righty. And then you all of a sudden you turn it into an approach shot. You need to practice those shots. Just like a golfer, the golfers are going to go out and go, okay, I'm going to have a ball behind a tree. I have to practice all these shots. It's really sad. We work with a lot of players that they're redo. They come to us, they're 12, 13 years old, even older at times, and they got to go back to the drawing board. And yeah, you can go back to the drawing board. Yeah, you're 15, you double your life. I mean, even 7 years from now, you can even map it out. Well, you've got, you're 13 years old. You just go through it. If they're taking the gap year, repeating grade 8, how many days to their college career's over? And yeah, if there's a hole in your boat, you got to fix the hole in the boat. Now, granted, if some kid's top 10 in the country and they're going to sign a scholarship that's worth $300,000, maybe you work within that player's game. Some kid comes to you and their UTR is a 7, an 8, a 9, a 10. You get to be 11 on the UTR, you're a decent player. You're a decent player. I mean, last year at Florida, the number 6 player was a 14. It's like, let's go through a little perspective. But so the offensive defensive is very good, but you can hit the underspin lob offensively. You can hit the topspin lob defensively. The one thing is Vic Braden, let him take gas. Let him hit it. You don't have to hit the lob as a winner. I think kids have watched too much TV tennis, too much YouTube, too much Tennis Channel. I think we can say you got to ditto this on the backhand side. Any other comments on specialty shots?
Specialty shots? Let's see what I have here. I think I'm good. Obviously, I think if you're a one-handed player versus a two-handed player, the technique starts to get a little bit different on a lot of these shots. I think certainly two-handed players need to also be able to play shots one-handed. But no, I think that's good. It's comprehensive.
I think with just for Christo coaching in Boston now, college coach is just for the record is Bud Schultz was a much better player than Christo Schultz. Why? Okay, he had skills where he could play all over the court, and it's not to beat anybody up. And that's where I heard Vince Spadea say at one time is that old school players could do a lot of things that the new school players couldn't do. Let's go at emergency shots. We'll start with a Peter Burwash quote. Tennis is a game of hitting emergency shots. With an emergency shot to us to define, it's a ball that's hit behind you. I love what you said about the backboard. We like to have kids feed the ball as an overhead and let the ball go over their shoulder. Again, coming back to the USTA, their performance coach, it's the Continental family. Forehand volley, backhand volley, serve. They just list all these shots that are hit with the Continental. And you're best to, when you're split step, to have a composite grip on the forehand volley. Just like making a chest pass in basketball, is that you shift your grip like a sliver, a fraction of an inch for a backhand. Right, if you're right-handed, right side at number 1. Because you're changing the angle of the racket face, and then you can drive the volley. You can go forward. And then you have time to change your grip to a continental grip for the overhead. So it's 3 different grips at the net. People say, no, it's simpler. I fell for that when I first got into tennis, and I was like so many people, you just use one grip for everything. It's like Allington said to me, we mentioned it playing ping pong. This is my sport, one grip. But you have to practice those shots. You can do hand-fed balls where you feed the ball behind the player. We've listed off a few. We have names for them, and we actually have kids just practice this. Parking lot workout. Okay, you can get up early in the morning, sunrise, and say, okay, we don't need a tennis court. It's kind of nice how the parking lot, they'll have a slot for the car. And you just give a kid one parking slot and say, let's go to work. And you shadow swing basic shots. And then you shadow swing specialty shots. And then you shadow swing emergency shots. And Billie Jean King, you have to visualize it. You have to see it. Let's start with the reverse overhead. You referred to it, which is fine, as a backward overhead. The laver on the Wheaties commercial box. You want to choose the shot that has the longest hitting zone and you can generate the most racketed speed. So really two-handers. My son Connor played for Ty Tucker, and Ty used to call it the Martini Hingis shot because my son would play a high backhand with two hands. And Ty would say, don't play that shot. I've coached so many players that should play the shot. They have a two-handed backhand.
Right.
Ideally, at the net, you want an overhead. So we say, Braden, 75-25. 75% of that net, you're going to move over and take an overhead. But if the person gets the lob over your backhand side and it's in front of you, play it. You're a two-hander, even if you're a one-hander. Used to do this thing where this is how Borg hits it because he would, let the racket head go below the wrist, a coupling effect where you stop your right hand and you snap your left hand. Connors would play from the shoulders. Vilas at that time, he would play it one-handed. He'd just go up and he just, just like you hit a topspin lob on the backhand side. It's on our course, Tennis Intelligence Applied, to back up the specialty shots. How you hit a topspin lob. Vandermeer used to have kids put a ball between the racket and the net tape, and then bring the racket, touch your back. Got to be loose in the shoulder. Then move back and drop hit that and let the racket go up your back. Then lean back, because actually when you hit a topspin lob, you lean back. So then the racket face is open. But you reverse the angle of the swing. Lansdorp calls that the reverse forehand. But it's only when the ball gets way behind you that you're going to play that. Today, a young kid played that. He played cross court. I said, we mortals need to play that shot down the line. I always talk about Federer hitting that shot. It's like the second point. It's the finals of Wimbledon. He just snaps it off as a winner cross court. I was watching Federer play McDonald in practice at the U.S. Open. So he takes a ball that's hit over his head. He hits a reverse overhead drop shot for a winner. And Federer kind of looked around and goes, did anybody see that? I mean, he's just having so much fun. But if you just tell a kid, okay, this is how you hit the forehand. So it's palm in to palm out. You hit a regular overhead, palm in to palm out. It's going to go 180 degrees. But now you have to do it on the backhand side. And the shot's not too good for your elbow. If you had to hit those shots all day long, you definitely would have elbow problems. But you could do basket training. Have someone, okay, you feed your opponent 10, or your partner, feed them 10, and then you have to practice those shots. But one of the sad things is coming back to Vandermeer, so basic shots, you need to learn those for specialty shots. And then once you've learned specialty shots, we're going to teach you emergency shots. It's like the Bucharest backfire that we do in Mini Tennis 5. We don't want to have some kid run back. I saw a gal do this in the Australian Open. She went back and like a 3-5 lady, she didn't know how to hit that shot. She's just pounding ground strokes.
Yeah.
That reminds me, I was at Patrick Mortigolo's academy, and just talking to him about our tiebreaker test, and there's a girl who's 60 in the world. We didn't have her on I said, this won't take long. And I go, she won't pass this test. Oh, yes, you will. Yes, you will. And I said, okay. And sure enough, she pounded the first 3 shots, a ground stroke, and approach shot. And then I got her at the net and just crank a ground stroke at her. There's no way she's going to hit the target. Not a chance. I mean, it'd be okay if she's chopping a cherry tree, but because they just don't volley. But why don't you read them off there, what we've got written down, especially the emergency shots.
Reverse overhead, high backhand overhead, the backfire, the sky hook, the tweener, the side tweener, the backhand roll, and the forehand roll.
Let's work backwards on that. Vic Braden used to say, all these players got a continental grip on the forehand side. It's like a wave on the ocean. The racket face is open. You got to recruit the muscles to turn it to vertical. So goes the backswing, so goes the rest of the swing, and it's just like a wave turning over. And if you're late, you're long. If you're early, you're in the net. And Vic used to always say about François Durr. She would serve palm up. She was an amazing player from France, played big time tennis. No strokes, just no strokes. I mean, talking about just hitting a patty cake serve. But the guys with a continental grip, they would have a lot of problems with that. You see Federer, he played a lot of squash. We mentioned where Harry Hopman wanted his Aussie players to play squash. I think it was a myth years ago where it said, well, if you play squash, it's going to be bad for your game. You need to be able to hit the squash shots. It's a problem when a kid is trying to hit an emergency shot and they're not even outside the single sideline.
Mm-hmm.
We see so many kids because they don't do the leg work. They don't have the footwork. They're just not strong enough to get in the corner, get out of the corner. In your world, they haven't done enough work on fitness. And they're slicing forehands. I know you spent a lot of time with my son Connor. I mean, he just didn't like the physical side of it when he's younger, and he would hit slice forehand. But I knew he was going to be coming around as a little better player when he started screaming at himself for hitting slice. Because you're just hitting a minus.
All right.
Now, what happens in junior tennis is ball is hit three ways, plus, minus, IP. So just the language from Jacobson. Plus is strong, minus is weak, IP is neutral in play. But you're hitting a minus. But then the kid on the other side, they have no idea what to do with short ball, so they hit a minus. And then I'm out there and people wonder why I'm going crazy. He's in a bad mood. I'm not really moody because if you're consistent, you're not moody. The person who's moody is inconsistent. And, you have that instant hostility. I've got some kids that they're at the crossroads. I said that earlier, is they either got to step up, man up and get more competitive, get some juice. You teach people all these wonderful ball striking skills, and it's kind of like the expression, I'm not picking them to go to war. Okay, are they going to be one of your soldiers? But, the high backhand overhead, got to practice it. But again, it's amazing how many two-handers, they hit that. It should be a two-hander because it's in front, and they hit a total minus. They hit a total minus. Why you have to hit it down the line is just the expression, hold the line. Keep the ball in front of you. Because if you go cross court and you can't do anything with the shot, you could drive a train down the line. You leave the entire court open. So strategy comes into all these shots, and we've dummied it down. I mean, with if people were to understand our 7 concepts, we have kids play mini tennis and say, all right, do you know the 7 concepts? We have a group here from Canada, and they're after-school players. They're really well taught. Richard Hernandez, Miran Mann. But a lot of times an after-schooler, they're not in a chalk talk. Their life is they go to school like the old days, 8 to 3. They have that after-school extracurricular activity. But you have to study content. And when people study our content, they have to realize it's not GreatBase. That's just a name, and we should have called it Solid Fundamentals. I mean, can you really argue in any subject, any discipline, that you have to have a great base? Okay, we're going to teach first grade, second grade, third grade. It's going to be an experiment. We're going to skip the alphabet. We're not using the alphabet. I mean, it's not going to work out. With feeding shots, you don't have to be a great feeder. You can choke up on the racket. It's a conspiracy that, you have to pay a pro $100 and, or $70 an hour. I think this is a crisis at tennis clubs. I understand where maybe you're only limited to 6 balls, and that's fine. Just take 6 balls, because you are going to interfere with the court next door if you go out there with 100 balls and your kid's hitting them everywhere. But take 6 balls, if that's the rule, and just practice with those 6 shots. But if they are spraying balls everywhere, go find a backboard. Go find an open field. Get some foam balls and be creative and practice in your driveway. It's really sad that when kids are talking, they're talking UTR. They're asking people what the score was. They're not talking skill set. They're not talking skill acquisition. The skyhook, Connors, you don't want to give up the net. You can have people feed with a skyhook. It's like, all right, go home. Here's your YouTube assignment. Just watch enough cricket to see how they throw the ball. You can have people actually go out and say, okay, we're going to practice throwing the ball where you don't bend your arm. But the shot has to be practiced. Coming back, Dom wanted us to mention deliberate practice. If, say for example, you're going to only hit, out of 100 points, perhaps 1 reverse overhead, but it's 1 point. You got to find time to practice that shot.
I think speaking about deliberate practice, a book that I've handed out and read to groups of students and scoured myself is not necessarily Daniel Coe, the talent code, which is great, but Daniel Coe, the little book of talent. And I certainly think there's a case for talking about how he mentions hard skills versus soft skills. And when you're building hard skills, say grip, swing, and body on a forehand ground stroke, versus the soft skills of, say, an emergency shot, building hard skills to be more like a careful carpenter, and then building soft skills like a playful skateboarder. And so just even and I'm sure Dom could talk about this, way more sophisticated than I can, but even the areas of the brain in which you're trying to build myelin for soft skills versus hard skills, the creativity and the mentality when you're practicing shots like this, I think is really important to mention as well. And that's if you haven't read that book, I know the talent code is the foundation, the history and the research, but then the little book of talent, small, very easy to read, 52 tips. And that's one of them at the very beginning, is when you're building certain skills to focus on your mentality when you're building those skills, the careful carpenter versus the playful skateboarder.
We have the bag check. We actually, on Tennis Intelligence, applied my son Connor, Emmanuel Yamas, who played tennis at Rice. So they're doing the bag check, and notebook and a book you're reading, and bands and skip rope and running shoes, and change of clothes. The tournaments where they let you take 10 minutes, go take a shower. You can talk to the kid while they're in the shower, but you're much better off to let's have the kid run in and take a quick shower. But with our students are supposed to have the little book of talent. Have it in your shoulder bag. And I tell kids all the time, well, you're part-time in a program. We tell people, no, read our Facebook post. If you can't, your parents, go through it on the weekend. It's going to take you 5-7 minutes at the most to go through it. And, if you're not doing that right now, we've had one 15-year-old is helping us manage a little bit with, or a lot with Facebook. And we have another 15-year-old who's not even looking at it. And I have no problem going, you're not in the program. You're a part-timer. And, again, some of these kids from Mir on Man, Richard Hernandez, and, how long have you worked with these coaches? 5 years. And I go, you got to be kidding me. This is how you hit the ball, and you've been working with these guys for 5 years. You got to be kidding me. And but back to the bottom of the list, the rolls, you're going to have an open racket face. Forehand side, backhand side. Backhand side is easier because you're swinging your shoulder housing the hit. You're swinging with your body. On the forehand side, you're swinging across your body. That used to be commonly stated when everybody was hitting a one-handed backhand. You're swinging away from your body. But the racket face is open, coming back to racket head awareness. So continental grip, and you're going to roll the racket. In other words, the racket face is open. Now you think the racket face has to be vertical to hit. If you're going to lob, it's got to be open. So how's that racket face at the hit? And you have such a short hitting zone. And that's where it's going to be a horizontal release. But the practice those shots. So when you give partners, and you don't, the thing is with group dynamics, Dennis Vandermeer, you don't have to have two people on a tennis court. It's 7,200 square feet. And you can have, from the baseline to one fence, the baseline to the other fence. I mean, those are areas where, okay, we're going to toss these balls and you're going to practice these shots. And then, especially with people who have to deal with indoor court time. Down here in South Florida, I'm just amazed how difficult it is to just find court time. Certainly it's the population, but it seems like everybody comes to South Florida to play tennis. Mm-hmm. There's all sorts of empty courts all over America. But so we play mini tennis 5. We call it mini tennis 5 with a Hollywood twist. You can actually hit the ball 3 times. If they're skilled, you can do it on 2 hits, but you actually have a kid stop it like a volley. And then the cupping action they have to have for a drop shot, they hit the drop shot where the ball bounces and goes behind them. Mm-hmm. And then they hit a trick shot. So basic shots, specialty shots, emergency shots, trick shots. Can you have a kid drop hit a ball with so much underspin that it bounces and comes back over on the other side? With racket head awareness, when people are running, we had a kid today chasing balls, and just like little kids when they're in a relay race. I mean, again, a job I think I'm qualified for now is be great. I'd like to apply somewhere to be the athletic director of an elementary school. And this is what I would do. All right, mom and dad, we're going to get your kid hour and a half. Be nice, hour and a half minimum. Maybe it's a 45-minute class during the day, 45 minutes after school. And we're going to teach them how to catch a ball. We're going to teach them how to throw a ball. I know I learned this from you, where you, in the NFL, put the thumbs together like this. Mm-hmm. When the ball's above your head, and you put your pinkies like this when it's below. I mean, soft hands. Most kids have hands of stone. I mean, they're pushing their arms out like this, and the ball just bounces off their hands. Kids can't catch today. Why? They don't play catch. And running alignment. So a kid, he's running after a ball, and he's not going eye socket, hip pocket. He's not moving like a toy soldier. And when you do that, your racket is on edge like this. Your racket's on edge. That's how you can hit a side tweener. With, so the ball's hit to your side. So you come in and your hand just goes down, and you snap the racket to be vertical. It's just like when someone is a center in football, American football. It's a throwing action. That's how you hit a tweener. They're gonna when they're hiking in football, the football's on ground level. With the teenager, Roger Federer did this one time, a huge point in the Australian Open way back when. I think he was playing Safin. But he hit a tweener when he shouldn't have hit a tweener. I imagine saying that about Roger. Roger, you shouldn't have hit it at that time. But if you can, in football term, if you can make the button hook, receivers, a kid doesn't know what that means today, is that they don't play touch football. It used to be where kids would be in one room, 3 generations, and they'd be watching a football game. We were coaching kids that don't even know what a first down is, and they're an American. So you run down, and then you just turn like a button hook, and then so the defender, he doesn't turn when you turn, and it's just timed with precision with the quarterback. It's going to be 10 steps down and out, and boom, they throw the ball many times before they've even turned, because they got 3 refrigerators coming at them on wheels. Like, these guys weigh 300 pounds. But I think girls, it's amazing. The teenager. I know some kids that hit a kid named Valentine, if he's listening. Why does he hit a tweener? Because he practices it. Roberto Calla coaches young kids, Santiago, forever. He could hit a tweener. Why? Because he practiced it. It's in the garage, and it was important to them to learn how to hit the tweener. People don't just snap their fingers and learn how to hit a tweener. Again, a backboard is a great way to practice that shot. And there's technique to it. If you wanted to go to YouTube, just put in Tennis Smith, which we used to call our school, or GreatBase Tennis, and just put in tweener. And you'll see progressions where it's like a receiver catching a ball, how you let the ball drop, shoulders are squared, facing the opposite fence, don't turn, and then you let the ball drop. We do it as a tournament. We have to have the ball bounce 5 times, and then 4 times, and 3 times. You have to practice these shots. And the macho male ego, the boys want to hit the tweener, the girls. I remember Gabriella Sabatini. I mean, she could hit a great tweener. There's going to be a time when it was an emergency. That's the only choice you have. You make a beeline straight to the ball, and that's your only play. Yeah, that's your only play. But again, many times junior boys, you could hit a specialty shot, which is more of a percentage play. Make the button hook, give yourself space, circle, get behind the ball, and throw up a high defensive lob. Versus hitting the Hollywood shot. Again, just the shadow swing routine. Okay, this is how you hit the shot. Okay, shadow swing it 5 times. Okay, the backhand overhead, the high backhand, the backfire, the sky hook, the tweener. And if they become familiar with the term, the name, it's just like with drill. We have Elvis Presley 1, Elvis Presley 2 on the serve, and it comes from Braden. You just stand with your toes facing the net. You take Don Leary's word picture method. And, we take information from different tennis coaches, basically the 8 pillars. So your handcuffs on the serve, baseball pitcher, but you're just turning your shoulders. And then people, this is so weird. And then all you have to do is just take say you're a righty, you just take your right foot back and do the same thing. You just turn. We do the drill. Natalia was helping us today, and Natalia Sorkin, is that you have one kid tossing the overhead, then because one player's hanging onto the ball, just one ball righty, ball in their left hand, their partner's right next to them. They toss the ball up for an overhead. So they hit an overhead, then they hit a serve. And it's probably the best way to define how, if you use transfer teaching, okay, this is the overhead, this is the serve, and they're so close. With the practice, hitting a ball where your partner can catch it. So you just give 7,200 square feet spread out, and that's where really good players can use a red ball. We're taking these red balls, which are great training tools, and you're gonna to be great, toss a high backhand. You don't have to be hitting over the net. This is how you play it: continental grip, reverse overhead. So instead of the palm being in and palm going out, it's gonna be your knuckles in and knuckles out, and you have to practice it. But coming back to naming it, the Elvis Presley 1, Elvis Presley 2, I mean, we have a few original ideas, is Elvis Presley 2 is Elvis on a skateboard snap down. And I go back, Oscar Wagner. I picked that up from Oscar Wagner. Then I found out later Wayne Bryan did it for years, where you have to snap up, thumb in to thumb out on the serve. So it's crazy, but how you get people to understand that is you have them snap down, because the toss has to be in front for them to snap down. And when you do that drill, it's like all of a sudden the toss is low, it's out to the right, it's in front. It's just like with going back to Burwash, to have people hit a backward serve. It's going to be a continental grip, and then they're going to keep their head still, and they have to hit it over on this side. But let's wrap it up. I mean, we've talked about specialty shots, emergency shots. Flanagan. What do you got?
I think you have a lot of young players now that they're practicing some of these emergency shots. They're just playing so much tennis. They're playing so many matches that they kind of experiment with some of those things. I think the biggest void in tennis teaching has got to be the lack of teaching the specialty shots and then the situational shots. I think the role of, like you said, being the spoiler, understanding how to frustrate your opponent, whether it's unconventional or frowned upon to hit invitation shot versus drop shot, to hit a moon ball, to hit to be considered a lobber, to hit defensive lobs. There's the patterns you see in junior tennis and even college tennis and professional tennis. Like the golfers, I think you said that very well, that golfers understand they're going to be in a situation where they're stuck behind a tree, or they practice shots where they just bury the ball in the sand trap, and just Tiger Woods just sticks his foot on top of the ball and pushes it down, and he knows he's going to have a situation where he needs to be able to hit that during a round. I just find that the academy, the factories called academies. I mean, they're just basically just trying to find other people of a higher UTR or similar UTR just to kind of bang the ball around with. But are they really acquiring skills? And that's where I come back to that Daniel Coyle Little Book of Talent, is the right mentality when you're practicing these skills. If you're a playful skateboarder, you're pretty relaxed and you don't care if you fail. And I think a lot of players need to put themselves in a situation where they're not afraid to make mistakes and work on things like this. I think especially the approach shot and the approach shot lob, the half volley, touch volley.
You think about, you mentioned situation of the football, the quarterbacks, the teams, 2-minute drill. They practice those situations. Belichick tried to make the practices much more difficult than the games. So they have the quarterbacks not only being rushed by the interior line and linebackers, but they got 3 assistant coaches coming and they're throwing those small dummies just to create interference, create havoc. With, it's not to belittle anyone, but I was at a tournament this past weekend at a large facility. There's 4 academies that are based at the same facility. Roberto Calla, obviously a native of Peru. Spanish is his native tongue. So a lot of times to listen to what someone says in a second language, third language, they just nail it because they have to simplify what they're saying. And they say they use the least amount of words possible. And he'd watch people say, and you would just say, no information. Strategy-wise, you say, play the tiebreaker test. Cross court to the middle. Cross court to the middle. Wait for a short ball. And you don't always play down the line. I mean, we're teaching people, we have them go down the line because we're trying to teach a long hitting zone. But, the kids that are learning to play tennis with no information, really, they're free. And their development is faster. They're going to be a better competitor because they're not thinking about they're not trying to play 3 different zones. It's just primal. They're just trying to win.
Right.
But it's a given that at most academies, what they're going to do is drill in the morning. They're going to get a ball basket. They're going to get someone feeding balls. And the person feeding balls may not even be speaking the language of that country. And, in German, schnell, schnell, schnell. I mean, fast, 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 rapido, rapido, rapido. And they're just pumping out balls. And then in the afternoon, they play matches. We used to break the groups down, still would, okay, we're going to write a program. We've got ECD, early childhood development. And that shouldn't be childcare. Then it's skill acquisition. And then it's tournament prep. But it should be based on skill level. It doesn't have to be based on age by any means. But people think they're in tournament prep way too early. As we've said over and over again in these podcasts, throughout America, I think throughout any tennis country, but we need pre-academies. Kids are going to academies, and it's an injustice. Mike Larshide, we were talking about him earlier with, I love his analogy of what we're trying to do with the GreatBase. First it's print, and then it's cursive, and then it's signature. And what's happening is people are looking at YouTube clips, they're watching tennis on TV, and you could use Nadal, what a class act. So, Nadal, they're looking at Nadal's forehand now, but he used to hit a two-handed forehand when he was really young. So, that progression but how to acquire skills is practicing the shots. You can do solo feeds, practice on your own, practice these shots in front of a mirror. Say, okay, they talked about the drop volley, it's a cupping action. Ready position, unit turn, soften the hand. The ice cream, you don't do it with the wrist, you do it from the shoulder. Back up, you practice drop hitting a drop shot. And it all starts, okay, unit turn, rackets up high. It's really sad to see kids, for example, they take the racket low on the backhand side. I know I have 2 visitors here right now that are doing that. They take the racket low on the backhand, the two-handed backhand, and they take the racket high on the one-handed backhand. So they have 2 systems, and that doesn't tie in with the return serve. So when they turn, it's okay. It's up for a volley. It's up for stealing the ace. And then all the positives in letting the racket free fall. But many times, tangibles, you can measure grip, swing, body. We've talked about, we're going to get Warren Pretorius on, who's in charge of tennis analytics. What's first and foremost in tennis analytics are the numbers from the grip, the shape of the swing, what the body's doing. Those are the analytics that no one talks about. What are the gadgets? The teaching aids, the Israeli military. That's where the software came from. The name of the machines on the court. PlaySight. Well, PlaySight's not doing the math for grip, swing, body.
Right.
They might tell you how many times the ball's spinning and this and that, but where the ball lands. But it's still a grip, swing, body. When you learn to hit these shots. But again, coming back to intangibles is, again, you need to be able to compete. And it's unfortunate that people are competing with a very limited set of skills. Now, what happens, and the kids need to be told this, but you need to learn to fight, even though you're spending many hours in practice going slower and practicing all these shots. Now, you're going to go out and you're going to practice, you're going to play against kids that they're not practicing these shots. And it's a pretty safe bet that they're going to really be good from the baseline. If you can attack, you only know how good someone's strokes are once you see them play where pressure is applied. So this young boy talking about in the 12s, I mean, no one's applying any pressure against his forehand. No one's taking time and space away from him. So this weekend watching some kids play, just by the look on their face, is they got to become much tougher competitors. But I think to just tell them, hey, we've spent all this time working on an efficient strokes. You were a redo. We've got the film. We spent all these, we spent now months and months helping you rebuild your game. So that's a positive. But at the same time, you need to compete. And you have to compete to learn these skills. I mean, back to what Dom with deliberate practice, a year is 1,000 hours. And you really need more than that. Why don't you wrap it up, Brandon? We're over and out.
I'll leave us with this, and then we'll see where this leads us. Mansour Barami.
Yeah.
Trick shots, specialty shots. I know we didn't mention him, but then also too, I'm sure many of the listeners do follow this guy already, but Steph Bojic. I'm gonna probably butcher the pronunciation of his name. STEF_BOJIC. Trick shot master on Instagram. Really fun to watch. I think he's gotten close to 200,000 followers already. So
how do you pronounce his name?
I'm just guessing. I'm going to say Bojic. It could be Bojic. I don't know. But
you
BOJIC.
You mentioned him before, but I didn't look it up.
I think he's Serbian. I don't really know that much about him, but he's got some incredible trick shot videos. And then of course Barami is just incredible too to watch. And those of you younger players listening to this podcast, if you don't know him, you got to look him up as well.
No, I remember being at this Mortagolo Academy with my son, and there was a kid who could just do so many tricks, spinning the racket, juggling tennis balls. I know a kid who used to be able to spin the racket on his finger, spin the racket on his forearm, and then spin the racket on his leg, and then catch the racket. Used to practice with a guy from Italy. He wasn't a very good tennis player, but what he could do is he could stop a ball on the instep from soccer, instep of his foot, then he hit it on his thigh, then he hit it on his head, then he hit an overhead. It was just so impressive. But he took that skill set from soccer, but he did it all the time. He would go to the backboard and practice that. He was a showman. It was like, this is our friend Franco. He can't play tennis very well. I mean, I used to just feed balls. Everybody watch this. And I mean, he was like money practicing that. But every shot has to be practiced over and over again. But I think it's back to Vandermeer and Burwash. I mean, with Vandermeer, specialty shots come from basic shots. And then with Burwash, you're going to be put in a situation where the ball is not where you want it to be. And you've got to understand where the tennis court is, court awareness, racket head awareness, and you got to practice those shots. But over and out, I hope our listeners got something out of this. Again, thanks for Don. He wanted to mention deliberate practice, a few other things. We'll put his questionnaire for true grit. I know I'm working with some people that need to acquire some grit. But thanks, Brandon.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Good night.